Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, it's Friday, and that means it's time for another podcast, but not before you guys make sure you support the sponsors that support Let's Talk Dubs. So don't forget, go subscribe today at VW Trends Magazine at vwtrendsmagazine.com, a magazine for the people, by the people. So go check it out today at vwtrendsmagazine.com and subscribe so you don't miss an issue. Right now, they're out quarterly, and you guys will be getting ready to see Zorba come out in the next issue or two. Zorba's been getting a lot of attention lately, as you guys would see if you're following my Instagram or my Facebook. I did that video with Nicole Johnson's Detour YouTube channel down in San Diego this week. Early morning, we ran out to Calico Basin and shot the thumbnail pictures and some stuff like that. And I'm excited for that video to come out. I'm excited for the video to come out, not because I need to feed my ego or none of that stuff. I get excited when we are able to push the VW hobby into spaces where it normally is not, And what I mean by that is Zorba was found, the director for Detour, Michael, actually was at the Grand National Road Show, him and Nicole walking around looking for cars, and they saw Zorba, and she tried to contact me on Instagram through my Bill T Vegas, but I hardly ever check that one. So if you guys are DMing that one, just DM me at Let's Talk Dubs. I don't even know why I have that one up. At any rate, they left cards and stuff in my vehicle for the podcast, and I went to the Roadster show. Why did I go to the Roadster show? Because there's very few Volkswagens there, and I love to bring stuff to environments where there's not a lot of VWs to help get other people into Volkswagens, because that's why kids get into cars, right? They see something, they're like, I need to find one of those and build one of those. So again, I want to make sure that we get as many people into this hobby and keep it going as much as possible. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited for the coverage that Zorba is going to get. A lot of people getting some feedback, maybe get some more people listening to the podcast, because the more that people listen to the podcast, the more it conjures up more excitement about their VW hobby, and they get into it. I just got a message the other day on Messenger, and I'll read that to you real quick. So Nick Wilkins sends me a message on Facebook, and he says, your podcast has got me motivated to get this on the road. Bought it in 1993. Big up Bill T. U.S. imported now. Stroud, UK. And when I get I get a lot of messages like that, guys, that people stumbled across the podcast somehow. It's the only podcast that they listen to, because they don't listen to podcasts, but they get motivated when they hear it, and they get excited to get their car back on the road. And for me, I'm so happy that I can be part of that, to where, I bring some excitement, and that excitement doesn't take much on my part. It takes me sitting down with somebody that's an enthusiast in the hobby, and then there's something that they say that people connect with, and people get really excited. And just like this, Nick over here, he's got his car at the MOT. It looks like it's a 70 convertible, pretty dope. It looks like Yukon yellow on Fuchs, and it's at the inspection place in the UK. They're getting it all checked up, and he gets hyped listening to the podcast. And I know I get that feedback from a lot of people, and then I get a lot of people that are like, dude, we need it every week. So I wish I had a professional crew with me, because you guys know that I can gab for hours, and I would just stack them and rack them, and I'd have a library of 1,000 for you. But it's a one-man army over here, and I'm doing what I can. So I'm glad I'm able to bring them to you. I'm glad that I'm able to produce something for you guys. Do my part to get Volkswagens seen and out there. And I'm not the only one, man. There's a ton of people out there that are getting Volkswagens in different spaces. Buddy Hale, for sure, going all the hot rod shows. A lot of guys that are taking their Volkswagens to different shows just to get, the reaction from people, and, just get more people interested in Volkswagen. So I'm excited about that. So I'll let you guys know. It should come out next week sometime, and I'll see if I can find out when they're going to drop it. If they're going to drop it, and if they're going to end up doing a premiere. We'll also have Nicole Johnson on the podcast. She's got some pretty cool history. She's, monster truck racer, crawler, off-road, all kind of stuff. And she's got this cool YouTube channel where she drives a bunch of different stuff. And I'm sure you guys have seen it, because she did the one with the Subaru powered 540 horsepower Super Beetle. That was like a total sleeper a guy built. So her first video was a Volkswagen video. And then after all that, sequentially, there was a lot of different stuff going on. But what was cool is, I reached out. I found out I had a mutual friend that knew her, and I said, hey, let me know if she wants some other Volkswagens on there or whatever. And then nothing came from that. And then for her and the producer to see Zorba over there at the Roadster show and then leave cards, be like, we want this car on the show. It was just kind of cool because, I just do my part to try to get some more Volkswagens out there. That's why I go to Porsche meets. That's why I go to hot rod shows. That's why I do a lot of different stuff just to get more exposure for the car. So it's kind of cool the way that it worked out eventually without any outside influences. And I was super excited about that. But that happened, guys, because I was at a different show than a Volkswagen show. And I'm not saying don't go to Volkswagen shows. What I'm saying is don't be afraid to take your Volkswagen to some other shows. You'll find them. If you haven't done it, you'll find it really enjoyable. I really enjoy taking Zorba to the Diecast Super Show, and I got all kind of people there's a variety of cars. It looked like a parking lot, right? There's one of everything there. And a lot of people coming up to me talking, and they're like, man, I don't remember this Gia, did you custom modify the body? And then I just get the process to explain them, about the Type 3 Gia and all this stuff. So it's fun. If you haven't done it, I highly suggest taking your Volkswagen to a different show every now and again, just so, we get what we do, our style out there in front of people. So that I'm excited for. I got a lot of stuff I'm super stoked for. Again, one of our sponsors you want to support if you can is Ross Wolf. High quality aftermarket parts made for enthusiasts by enthusiasts. Go check out their website today at rosswolf.com. I'd like to welcome a new sponsor to the show, Icon Pistons. You guys want top quality, high performance pistons. There's only one piston to go with, and that's Icon Pistons. Currently, they're made in 85.5, 92s, and 94s, 3 different pin heights. Go check them out. Where are you going to buy Icon Pistons at? Well, I'm going to tell you that in just a minute, but first let me pump up the pistons a little bit. These are made from 4032 alloy, which allows you to run tighter piston-to-wall clearances so you can get down, keep that compression, and make that motor put out maximum power. They've got 2 1.5 millimeter top rings and then a 4 millimeter bottom ring, which makes getting new rings for these things a lot easier. And also each piston gets M42 skirt coating to protect against dry startups, as well as give an extra layer of protection. The skirt profile is optimized for stability and performance in boxer engines. And how would these guys know? Because these guys make millions of pistons every year. And now the Big Boy Piston Company put out a line because there's a VW dude that snuck in through the back door and said, hey, boss, let's make some Volkswagen pistons. So the highest performance pistons that you can get right now, Icon Pistons. Go get them checked out today. Where can you buy these Icon Pistons? Type E Motorsports, CB Performance, RevMaster, the Dub Shop, and Churco Performance. So go check it out today. You want the best pistons? Make sure you only get Icon Pistons. And other exciting stuff that I'm working on right now is I've got that 69 bug that I've had for a while. It was kind of a lifted class 11, and one crazy weekend is coming up in October. A bunch of 80s cars are coming out. I went through the garage and I got a bunch of 80s stuff in the garage, and I thought, it'd be cool is if I took that 69 and did an 80s look. I know a lot of you guys are going, oh no, don't do it. But I sold the car to a friend of mine. He already lowered it and turned the whole thing around. So that car is going to be coming out for the One Crazy Weekend build, and it's going to be full 80s setup on it. So it's pretty easy to do. It's going to need a quick paint job, some graphics on it, and I've already got wheels for it. So I'm excited for how that thing's coming out. I actually bought a set of door panels on the Samba. A guy named Thomas on there. Thanks, Thomas, for the door panels. And they were a set of original J-Bugs door panels, the gray with the pink and like a baby blue stripe on them with a triangle and a circle. If you know. And so that's what's going to be happening with that. So because I needed one more thing on my plate. Another thing coming up, guys. I've got a bunch of friends. I've talked before about a friend of mine that had passed away, and his widow's just got tons and tons of stuff. So what I'll be doing soon is I'm going to be offering a lot of those parts for sale through the Samba in bulk. So some of you guys out there that have shops and you guys want to buy a bulk order but can't afford to buy all of the stuff, we'll definitely make you guys some deals. I'm working on getting that site set up, and I'll start telling you guys where to pick that stuff up. It's quite a bit of parts. It's all OEM, Brazilian and Mexico, brand new stuff. And so when I say that, this is actually made by Volkswagen, and it's Volkswagen quality stuff. And a lot of it is no longer available. It hasn't been available. This stuff's been sitting in a storage facility for probably the past 7, 8 years. And a lot of this OEM VW stuff is no longer available. And if you're interested in any of this stuff, send me a message at bill@letstalkdubs.com. and I can get you an inventory list of what is available, and we can work something out if you're a small shop, because I'd love to help out small shops with this and just give them a little bit better deal than what they would get normally wholesale, and maybe have an opportunity to buy some parts that are no longer available. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, again, Bill at letstalkdubs.com. But that's what's happening with that. Don't forget to go register for One Crazy Weekend this year. It's man, we're 6 months out and the room reservations are already stacked. I mean, I've got half a dozen people, if not a dozen. I think it's up to a dozen now. People from the UK flying over for this event. It's gonna be legit. So some of you guys got buses and cars with extra space, man. Make sure you invite these visitors into your cars for the cruise, the poker run, all that fun stuff, because it's just gonna be a rager of a time, man. We're 6 months out and there's a huge stack of room reservations already. So don't miss out, guys. Let's sell out the whole hotel, dude. Who cares? How rad would that be, right? So if you guys are on the fence about going, go. I know you guys are like, well, if you got so many rooms, so why are you pushing it? I'm pushing it because I don't want you guys getting left out. I don't want you. Last year, we had 20 cars that couldn't make it into the show because we'd pre-sold everything and then there wasn't enough space. We completely filled the parking lot because 50 people showed up thinking, I'm going to register the day of. And part of the challenge is when we're working with a hotel and casino facility like that, we try to pre-make as many plans as possible. I know even myself, I'm planning to go to the VW Revival, maybe not, probably going to go. But it's like, I don't pre-register. Now, they don't offer pre-register over there that I know of. But this show is different. So this event is different. I can't even call it a show. This is a weekend experience is what this is. This isn't a show from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. This is a Thursday through Saturday Volkswagen experience. Bring your Volkswagen to Vegas, drive around Thursday on a free day. You'll have a list of places that you can go that you get preferential treatment and a little bit of a local discount. If you want to go to the Punk Rock Museum, I'm going to be hitting up some of the other museums here in town and some other local spots that you can go check out where you'll go there to your Volkswagen and you get some preferential treatment, treated like a local, so you won't get that tourist thing. And so you can cruise around Vegas, come back to the hotel, park your car in a secured location that has an unbelievable view at night, and then hang out in the hotel, at the bars, at the lounge, wherever, hanging out with other VW people, just chatting and having a great time and really just enjoying the whole experience, man. Those that have gone know, and that's why it keeps getting bigger every year. And it keeps getting bigger because you're actually showing up to a Volkswagen community event and people are making friends from all over the country, all over the world, and it just continues to keep growing and growing and growing. And I don't want you guys to miss that, man. Again, I do this all for the hobby because I love the hobby. I certainly am not getting paid for any of this. And it's just a passion of mine that I just really love to be able to contribute as much as I can into the hobby. So One Crazy Weekend is such a great time, man. I'm kind of jealous that I'm so involved in running everything that I don't get to really experience it. And my goal this year is to kind of have everything where everybody's in charge of their own section, and then I can just make sure facilitating things are going good. And once we're here, it's registered, it's going, and it's just we all get to have a great time because the strip cruise is a blast. The poker run is a riot. I mean, all these things that we do. The car show is a car show, and it's super cool for the winners, the top 20 that they pick. They get this super rad steel neck lanyard that they get to hang from their neck that looks like the Vegas sign. It says One Crazy Weekend, and it has the year on it, and those are the top 20 picks. And they're super cool because they're heavy. You can wear it with pride around for the rest of the day. It's a real favorite keepsake for a lot of people. So I'm going to be probably making something similar or a little bit different for the shows that I'll attend this year. Like the show that I'll be attending in Canada, I'm bringing a trophy for my favorite car, and then I'll do the same thing at Viva Skeg Vegas. So those are two events that I'll be at this year. So make sure that you guys check that out, and also I'll be at Air Mighty as well. So, man, there's just so much going on, and I'm excited to be out there. So I'll see you guys in Southern California around first weekend of May. I'm going to be hitting the RVA show. I'm going to go to the DKK Cruise Night, the RVA show, Type 3 Open House at ISP West, and then the VW Revival on Sunday. So that's going to be taking place in on the 30th, 31st, and the 1st of June. And then I'll be back again in California, but I won't bring Zorb. I'll be bringing my Chop Top for the DKP 60th anniversary car show that they're going to be having over there. I'll get more details on that. We're going to be doing something. Dean Kirsten and I are going to be doing something fun on Friday before the event. So a lot of guys from DFL coming to town. I have a DFL video that I got to get finished. I mean, I'm like 30 minutes of time to finish editing and publish a video. So my goal is find an hour to sit down and get this 30 minutes of work done. See how that works? And get that video up. I've also got Pedro Sainz video just about finished. So again, man, if any of you guys out there in video editing land and you want to help out Let's Talk Dubs, let me know. I got tons of content that it's one of those things I just got to get around to doing it. So anyway, this week's podcast, I bought a set of wheels last week. And when I bought the wheels, I got to talking to this guy, and I'd heard his name before, Jason Lindquist, and he's out of Northern California area near like Cochran, California. And, we started chatting, and I come to find out we got a lot of mutual friends, and he's been involved in a lot of cars that people have bought and built. He's kind of a preservation type guy, loves an all original car. And so this week's podcast is Jason Lindquist. He does some restoration work for people and more preservation, car builds and stuff like that. So he's out of Northern California. Good dude, a wealth of knowledge, and we'll probably get him back on the show in the near future when we're going to be doing some battles. At one point during the podcast, I talk about it would be cool to have for money a Jeopardy type Volkswagen game. So about the history and cars and correctness and whatever. So I think that would be something super fun to do. But again, these are all ideas, man. They just keep forming in my brain, and they're good stuff. So this is a good podcast. It's a great listen, and we kind of geek out on some of the details with respect to some of the early cars, mid cars, and late cars of the 60s. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it this week. Jason Lindquist on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Okay, everybody. So on today's show, last week I was looking around on the Samba. Actually, not on the Samba. A friend of mine had sent me an ad for like a shorty bus for sale. So my buddy Mitch that listens to the podcast, I got that, but I didn't buy the shorty bus. As I scrolled through, there was a set of wheels that I've been looking for a long time because I'm always out looking for a different wheel game. And there was a set of Carrera, they're 4-lug wheels made by Performance Industries out of Oregon. And while buying those, I ran into the guy selling them, and that's Jason Lindquist, and he's out of Fair Oaks, California. Now, Jason's been involved in a lot of builds that you may know, and up in that Northern California area, he's kind of a reference guy a lot of people use to know exactly what's what, and he knows the Bible when it comes to all the specific original stuff. So on today's podcast, we're going to welcome Jason Lindquist. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Look, I'm glad we got to meet over these wheels that I picked up from you. And
I know.
And
it's funny that
we started talking, and then kind of find out we have a lot of mutual friends, and you've done a lot of work on a lot of cars up there in that area. And so kind of the way that we start the podcast always is what's your VW story and how did you get into Volkswagens?
So my VW story, two good friends of mine in high school. One was Dave Teachoff. He had a 72 Super Beetle, and a girl he actually used to date who had a 69 auto stick convertible. And at that point, I had never driven a VW. Mm-hmm. And my buddy Dave was like, hey, go ahead and take my car for a drive. And it's kind of hard to explain. It was just one of those things where I just kind of felt connected to those cars. And then before you knew it, came time for me to get my first car, and some friends told me about this 71, went and checked it out. It was $275. Motor supposedly had like 30,000 miles, and I picked that thing up, and then of course kind of started running into people in the area that had VWs. And then before you know it, I had picked up a 64 bug that I had taken the motor out of the 71, put it in the 64. And then I was introduced to the high performance end of it. There was a auto parts shop here in town that was called Victory Auto Parts. And there was a guy, Dave Valerio. Him and his dad were pretty well known. Bergs knew him, and Dave's dad did head porting, and he was like the dude with the fast. Actually, they called him. His nickname was Dude. Yeah. He had like one of the fastest bugs in the Sacramento area. And before you knew it, I was kind of getting into that part of it and getting a bigger motor and just kind of learning what's what. And then, of course, then later on, I kind of started getting into the, the correctness of them, learning what was correct and what wasn't. And
yeah, now what's the first car that you decide to go down that road? Because, doing a car custom is like everything. You just huck it over your shoulder and do something cool. But when you start going for like an all original, it becomes this really all involved hunt of like, it's gotta be correct. And then trying to figure out, because by the time we get these Volkswagens, they would pass around so much, we're not really sure what's correct. And so what was the first car that you started to do and chase down the accuracy of all the original stuff?
I think that would probably be, it kind of started when I want to say it was probably my third or fourth car. It was a 58 bug. It was just sitting on the side of the road. And at first, I'm kind of coming, I was with a buddy of mine. We're driving up on the back of it. I see the 62 to 67 taillights. And I'm like, I looked at the smaller license plate light. I'm like, oh, that looks like a 63. And we go to pass it. And I told my buddy, hey, stop. And I saw the refrigerator door handles. And I'm like, there's no way that's a 63. It's got the refrigerator door handles. So we go back and we end up talking to the guy, and he'd had this car forever. And I think that was that pivotal moment where I started really getting into what was correct. At that time, of course I knew it was supposed to have snowflake taillights. Yeah. And then it was like, the more I started going through it, I wasn't hitting it like super heavy at that time, but that's kind of what started it. Was, because and then you see a lot of cars, because like when I first got into them, that was like the era of like, billet was like super popular, back in the 90s, and, the two-tone paint jobs with the white on the side, and one-piece windows were kind of, going away, but people were still doing them. And, and I was kind of seeing like a trend of everybody kind of doing the same thing. And I don't know, back then I just didn't feel like I saw a lot of bone stock, super correct cars. And it just kind of became a mission of mine to, learn everything that I could about them. And, and then of course, then I'm looking for all that correctness in every car that I had purchased since then.
And what's the first car that you own that you'd start going on the quest of like, I need every exact original part?
Oh, it was basically every car after that 58. Was like, I was just looking for those survivors. I've always really dug the cool stories, the cars that were hidden in barns and garages. And, you see a lot of these guys that are, rescuing cars, that have been sitting 20, 30 years. And, but that 58 was definitely what kind of sparked that, that whole, wanting the correctness. And then it just, a lot of my friends would give me a hard time because I'd get a car and I would feel like there was so much that had been messed with it. And, because I caught myself looking for that perfection. And of course, like now I know that, for the most part, that perfection doesn't exist. You have to make it that way, because these were just cars, to people. Didn't seem like a lot of people really cared about, it was just a means of transportation for them.
Right. Yeah. Some of my favorite things are, I had Klaus Messing on the podcast, and he's in charge. He has the registry for Hebmullers, and the Hebmuller that he owns a Hebmuller that has 62 and later taillights on it. And so that's kind of to your point, a lot of these people will take a car that, when they're driving them daily, they kind of update them for safety purposes. You know what I mean? And,
well, especially overseas,
right.
You see that in Europe a lot.
Yeah, they've all got to be up to snuff so that they can pass. They'll end up passing all of the road tests and all that stuff that's required of these things. So it's definitely pretty unique. Especially when you're first getting the game and you're thinking like, oh yeah, I got this stuff and it's super cool. And then someone comes up to you and goes, oh, that's wrong. Those aren't the right this and that's not the right that. And I've never really been a stock guy, but I can only imagine what it takes. So what was your reference guide to track down all the stuff? Like to know what was correct, what changed, and what was, incorrect?
I mean, a lot of it was, a huge majority of it, of course, was the Samba. But even then, with the Samba, I would kind of, read through a bunch of threads and I would kind of take each one with a grain of salt, because then you would find something else that totally contradicted the one, the previous, thread that you just read. So, and then of course, then I found out about, what was it called? The progressive refinements. I want to say, I can't remember if it was like BFY or whatever. I don't know if it was BFY that I actually put together. They made a website that you could actually go to, and progressive refinements, has the VIN numbers, the dates that those changes were made. And I mean, you could go down a huge rabbit hole looking through all this stuff, because there was, people don't realize how many actual changes were made
right
on each year. Like everybody says, 67s have the most 1 year only stuff. Well, I could debate that.
What car do you think has more one year stuff?
I mean, I've never really added it up, as far as each and every single one. But I mean, even a 1960 Bug. I mean, 1960, every single color for that year except for black was 1960 only. The ignition switch was 1960 only. The key code was 1960 only. The driver's door handle was 1960 only. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, of course, I'd have to, kind of pencil them all out to actually count how many each year has. But I can tell you that almost every single year has something about it that's 1 year only.
Oh yeah, there's no question on that. I mean, one of the things that I used to do is the spring '89 issue of Hot VW's How to Customize Your Volkswagen. That was, if you listen to the podcast, most people know that was kind of my go-to, right? That was my Bible I went to, because when I was, before I had a bunch of cars or anything like that, I would go through that magazine and they had about a 6-page layout that had the year by year differences, the total production number. It had a lot of the details. And so I'd start studying that stuff and I'd look at, and what's interesting, here's something that I've been playing with the ideas with respect to a, like a spotter's guide type thing. And just the 60s alone, when you're looking at the cars from the 60s, there's really, let's say 58 to 67, right? You've got the snowflake cars, which would be 61 through 58 or 58 through 61, right? And you have
55 through late 55 through 61.
Well, I'm just talking about big windows.
Yeah.
We're just going big windows only, right? So on the big window, you've got the 51 through 68. Those all have snowflake taillights, and the variations on those, they transition from icebox handles to push buttons, turn signal switch changes, I think, and reserve and fuel tank, some minor differences like that. But I think there's really 3 categories, right? There's going to be 62 to 64 is going to be another group. And then you've got 65 to 67. And I'm just putting 65 to 67 together because,
the larger size.
Right. You've got all the larger windows. And so it's always been interesting to me because, in the 60s, there's really, at least in my opinion, from 58, I'm just going big windows, right? Big windows up to 67. Yep. There's really 3 rough categories, and going through that Hot VW's magazine, you know, I'd see, okay, they stopped the icebox handles here. In 1962, they put the bigger tail lights. And then, you know, the fun thing that I think, and I might do this for one crazy weekend, I might put a game together where you've got to tell what year it is, and I'll give some clues, you know, because it might be like, you know, peanut turn signal, Pope's nose, and no keyhole on the passenger side.
Seeing that, all that stuff right there can be super confusing because
different terminology.
Well, not because of the terminology, but I actually, you know, because it's as much, I've spent 30 years studying all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I could be talking to, you know, one of my friends and, you know, something will come up and I'll learn something new. And just recently I had learned, because I had the car here. You know, one of the guys that I do some work for on all those cars, he had picked up this 61 ragtop.
Right.
Now, obviously, you say 61 ragtop, you're like, oh, you know, snowflake taillights guaranteed. But no, this car was built May 6, 61. And if you look it up, and there's even like factory literature showing that the German market cars at, I think it was May 2nd, they got the 62 and later taillights. Mm-hmm. So if you had a German market 61 that was built after May 2nd, it's going to have the later taillights. And it's like, that's almost like the perfect argument. You know, you show up and everybody's going to, oh, no, those taillights have been replaced. That's a 61. It should have snowflakes.
Right.
But that's not the case. Same thing with the peanut turn signals. A lot of people don't realize the peanut turn signals, you could get a 64 with the smaller license plate light and peanut turn signals.
Well,
the bigger.
Yeah, most of those, I think the caveat with those are mostly European delivery cars. Because
even for the U.S. cars, the 64s, if you look it up, 64s actually, so if you got a 64 that was built August, September, or October, it's going to have peanut turn signals and the small license plate light. November 1st is when they went to the wider license plate light and the bigger front turn signals. And that's U.S. market as well.
And so that information, like, where are you sourcing that information from?
Like I said, it's a combination of the Samba, progressive refinements, you know, and then of course having cars that, you know, were like that, and, you know, looking up, because that's one of the first things I do when I get a car, like checking the data of the speedometer, you know, to make sure, you know, that it falls in line. Because obviously, you know, on the Samba, you can look up the VIN number. You can get narrow it down to the month that it was built. You're not going to get it down to the day, but at least the month. And I've actually owned cars that were like that. And when I started doing the research, you know, different books too. There's a book by, I think it's just called The VW Beetle by Ryan Lee Price. And of course, it doesn't show everything because it would have to be a pretty big book. But that particular book, a friend of mine got it for me for Christmas one year. And I mean, that was like one of the best Christmas gifts ever. And it also breaks it down in between, you know, VIN numbers, dates, tells you all the changes, like interior changes, engine changes. I mean, it could be like they changed something about the clutch. Maybe they stiffened the springs and the, you know, the sprung pressure plate. You know, so that's, you know, between the books and the Samba, and then, you know, of course, progressive refinements. And it's all, like I said, the progressive refinements and all these pictures, you can tell they're legit because they're, you know, it's actual, you know, stuff from the factory from back in the day.
Well, and I think there's always during a transition year, you know, 64, like 63 to 64 is like they're changing turn signals, the license plate lights, things like that. 64, one of my favorite cars that I think is really, I don't think they get as much acclaim as they should, but I think a 64 steel sunroof car is one of the coolest cars because it's a small window steel crank sunroof car. You know, so it's you know, I have a drag bug that's a 64 steel sunroof car. that I ended up,
Oh, really?
getting. And I was like, dude, is this really it's a steel sunroof car? And it was, that 64. And I've had a couple of them, and I think to some people, they're fairly well sought after, but I think the steel sunroof, like if there's one of one cars, right? Like a 64 is so much different than a 63 from the standpoint, like regular production, right? We're talking the big turn signals, big tail lights, or big turn signals. I'm sorry, big license plate light. And then everything else is really similar to the 63, with the 63 having the small peanuts, and then the smaller license plate light. But that for me, like going through and understanding all this stuff made it good for me looking at a car somewhere in the wild and being able to figure out what year it is, because there's always stuff that's like fairly 1 year, like the 1300 Declan badge. It's a 66 Beetle on that.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of really intricate things, and I'm probably putting it together here shortly. I've been collecting a bunch of different images and stuff to go through kind of a year by year spotter's guide that's like no longer than 10 minutes, so you can't really go through all the stuff. It'd just be a general thing. But like you said, through the process of some of these books, they've, you're able to go down, because I do have a book with some bus information on it, and it says like February of this, they went from 12 vents to 11 vents, whatever it was. And it's like, I mean, they got it to the month on a lot of this stuff. And, I think some of that stuff's pretty cool. From your standpoint, you can only have one big window bug. What's the year that you pick?
It's actually probably, I mean, of course, I've always been known for, liking 58s. I mean, even my username on the Samba, it's Jay's 58. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got Lee on that 58 kick, Lee right. Bouchard, he's got one of the nicest 58s out there, really good friend of mine. But it's weird because as time has kind of gone on, I've kind of gone back to, I guess you could say, like my roots, and my first early bug was a 64.
Yeah.
And, and I actually, I might be buying a 64, which to me is super unique. I found out it was a car that was bought in Germany by a service member. And it's a full-on U.S. car, U.S. bumpers. There isn't anything European about it, except for the fact that the guy ordered it with a locking column and cloth interior.
Right.
And if anybody knows anything about 64s, one of the hardest things to do when restoring one of those is to obtain the seat covers. You just can't get them. It's a 1 year only seat cover. Nobody makes them. I mean, I've seen a couple places like, because, the Type 3s did share the same interior. And I have seen ISP West at different points in time where they've, somehow found like NOS rolls of it.
Right.
But, and then of course I did find a place that actually has in stock the correct 64 only European cloth. So to me, I would definitely say now it's a 64, especially because I'm going to be building one soon.
Now, you're saying 64 is the last year that they had cloth interior?
No, it's just 60. The interior for 64 is 64 only. It's a 1 year only interior. Same as 65. 65s, the seat covers anyway.
Right.
So, 65s 1 year only, 66, 64.
Yeah. Well, that's to say there's a lot of, because I had a 66. I had a 66 that my friend told me was a Euro bug because it had black rubber knobs in it, but it was a 66. The seats had a half pleat, like a solid piece of fabric over the top 8 inches of the seat, like that rolled over. Mm-hmm. And then it was pleated there. And it had hazard lights, but it had the big, and it had black, like the knobs, steering wheel, steering column was all black. It wasn't white, Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting to know the differences, with all these different cars. As soon as you bring in the European cars, all bets are off, because.
Yeah. And it's funny because, Lee and I were actually just talking about that the other day because, one of my biggest things aside from the correctness is I love correct interiors. I install interior and I like to be able to, install the interior as close to factory as possible. And we were, him and I were, cause he's building that, him and his wife are building that 55 and
yeah, Nicole's car.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful 55. And, we were going back and forth about like the B pillars. And that was like one of the biggest changes, the US cars, the B pillar and the material underneath the quarter window, it was straight vinyl. Whereas, but we were trying to figure out the Euros and how they did those because, you could get, I guess, what somebody would consider a European car. Like I restored a 53 right-hand drive oval ragtop a few years back, and they didn't get the birth certificate. And at the time, we just went with what it's called the herringbone material.
Yeah, and
got it all from Lenny Kopp when he still owned West Coast Classics, and it was always kind of a rule of thumb where the seat material matched the B pillars. But the European cars are different. And even though like on that 53, we went with the cloth thinking, well, it's a right-hand drive car. It's, it's from Europe. Come to find out, we get the birth certificate after the fact. That car was supposed to have vinyl interior. And, and then another buddy of mine, Jason Muller, he's got a super nice, super original right-hand drive Iceland Green 54. Never been touched, 100% original interior with all vinyl seats. And, so it can be confusing, and that's where you just got to spend the time and just do research and, because even finding pictures of original cars is not easy.
Right.
At some point, these cars have had their interiors replaced or they've been repainted or, but I definitely dig the correctness and being able to do these things as correct as possible.
Now you worked on a couple cars that have passed on to some other friends, right? That they've got and they've had. So there's a few cars that you had that you kind of, cause you're more into like preserving like original cars.
Yeah. I would rather preserve something than restore something.
Yeah.
But obviously if somebody brings me a car and they want it restored, you got to do what the customer wants, right?
Right. And so on the restorations that you do, what capacity of the work do you do? Do you do everything? Do you paint body and everything, or what aspects of the restoration do you do?
Pretty much everything, but paint and body, and I don't do transmissions. Transmissions, it's one of those things. If you don't have the tools, and finding the tools, it's not easy to do. So outside of, transmission and body and paint, you bring me a completed car, I can do the rest. I can do the full interior, suspension, wiring, engine, everything else.
Nice. And then the last couple of cars that you said you worked on, you had one car you worked on that was bad 58. So this is one of your cars?
Yeah. So the story behind that one, when I first got into them, I had my 64 and, it wasn't anything to look at, it just had silver 5-spokes on it, like the, what are those American Eagle ones? And,
the picture you sent me is 2-liter alloys on it. It's a 2-tone car with 2-liter alloys on it.
Yeah. I'll get to that part, so I had my 64 and then I found out about this VW car club that was local to me and it was called Capital City Classics. And the president of the car or that club, his name was Chris Weber. That was his car. And burgundy's always been one of my favorite colors. And I kept saying, I'm going to own that car one day. And it had, the blue California plates, that they started using in 70. And it said bad 58. It was spelled, BADD 58. And that was another reason that, that I had kind of gotten into 58s. And then fast forward, however many years later it was, that car had gone from the guy, Chris, who originally built it, to another guy named Jason that was in the club. He had gotten it. And as soon as I found out he got it, I found out it was for sale. And at the time I had just bought a brand new 2002 GSX R600.
Yeah.
And I wanted that car so bad that I traded my brand new motorcycle for that 58 ragtop.
No way.
And yeah. And, like I said, that was like, back in the 90s, that was like the typical 90s car, billet dash with the VDO gauges, the billet third brake light, it was painted burgundy, it had the 2-liter alloys, it was actually a 58 and it was on a 67 pan, which now I would never do. But of course, back then I didn't care.
Right.
And, that was a huge, pivotal moment as far as like, when I really started going crazy because, I had that car for a few years and I drove the heck out of it. I put so many miles on that car and then I started looking at it and, aside from, the other 58 I had mentioned earlier, I was looking at this one and I had seen a spot where you could still see the original paint. It was that light bronze metallic, like Shin from Hot VW's, like his car. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking, and the next thing you knew, I was taking out the VDO gauges and getting rid of all the billet stuff, getting rid of the Formula France steering wheel and putting an original semi-Batwing in it. And then I had to stop myself because I'm like, dude, the original pan's gone. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to fully bring this car back for sure.
Yeah.
I could look for another pan, but I'm like, it's just not worth it. And then of course, then the quest for the original cars just got worse even after that.
Yeah. With original cars, the interesting thing is, they're only original once. And so to find something as low miles as you can in original condition is really, it's really something unique to have. The most original car that I have is a 2003 Mexican Beetle, and it's got 4,500 kilometers on it. But I don't have anything vintage that's real old and low mileage. But I definitely wouldn't mind having one. I think if I were to have one of the big window cars, see, it's tough. If I was going to drive the car, an original mile car, I'd probably want a 67 because it has the most creature comforts of it's like the most advanced model of the big window cars before they go, into that.
For sure. That's the most drivable car that still has, the vintage look.
Yeah. It's got the 1500 motor. It's got the bigger motor. It's got a lot of things on that car that are really unique. I'm really partial to a 63 because one of the first cars that, my brother and I did together with what was my 1963 ragtop. And it was like, we pulled the car out of a junkyard. And then, what the funny part is, I think when you're a young kid, like whatever car you have is like your favorite. It's the best year. And here's why a 63 is the best year. Right. So everybody kind of has their own thing that makes their car the most unique or the best. What about, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you could find something cool about each one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's no question about that. So what, with respect to the early cars, the oval window cars, what would be your ideal year to have one of those?
Mine would be a metallic blue 53. After building that right-hand drive car, I hadn't really messed with a whole lot of super early cars. I'd done some, a little bit of work here and there on a couple split windows, mm-hmm. but they were like, super hacked together cars that, needed so much that, the people that, I was working on them for, they ended up sending those down the road. But when I built that right-hand drive car and I was learning all the differences about 53s because, I think you and I had even talked before about the Zwitter.
Right.
And a lot of people kind of seem to lump the Zwitter and the 53 oval together, but they're actually two separate cars. They share a couple little similarities, but they're completely different. Like the dome light, for instance, an actual Zwitter dome light doesn't even have a knob on it.
Really?
53 oval. Yeah. And a 53 oval dome light, for the most part, looks just like the ones, all the way to 66, 67 for the most part, but they had like this opaque white paint on the inside, and the little ivory knob only had 2 positions, not 3, like 54 and later. And so, I've always dug the 53s, especially, it's the first year of the oval, and you got the push button start, the 53 only ignition switch. Last year, the 25 horse. They're just a really cool car.
Yeah.
And I love that metallic blue.
Yeah. No,
I'm a sucker for metallic blue cars. That's why I dig your Type 34. That thing is that thing is awesome.
It's a color you don't see a lot, right? What's funny is as we're sitting here chatting, I was searching 1964 on the Samba just to look at some of the interior, and there's a guy selling a 64 sunroof, no motor, Arizona car for $3,000, which I think is, if you're wanting a small window car, and I think that probably the most advanced small window, big window car, if that contradiction makes any sense.
Yeah.
Let me, hang on one second. But I think that would be the coolest thing,
Oh yeah, for sure.
For a 64, if you're going to build like a nice street cruiser with the steel sunroof and all that stuff, I think that's definitely something that's pretty cool to get. Just because, I like how it has the advancement of the steel sunroof, and yet it doesn't have the, it's not a later big window car, but
and those sunroofs are only good if they've never been messed with. I don't know if you've ever,
I haven't, no.
If you've never taken one apart, oh my goodness, those things are a nightmare. And finding original cables is not easy. A lot of the aftermarket ones aren't the greatest, but yeah, when those things work perfectly. I'm actually kicking myself because I had a 64 Euro sunroof. And what's weird is, I'm sure you've seen cars with the locking columns.
Yes.
What's weird is, and I have seen them in US cars, but for some reason, the locking columns, you see them more in European models.
Right.
And most of them, you'll also see the hole in the dash where a normal ignition switch would go. And that's one thing I've been on the quest for, to try to figure out what the deal was with that, because most of the cars I've seen have had the hole, except that black 64 European sunroof that I had. The hole was never cut. Right.
Like almost as if it was ordered with that column, if it was not the factory, because otherwise, how else would you? Because I've seen where they have the key in the ignition and a key ignition and the keyed column. So it's. There's a lot of really interesting variables with respect to the those little things. Like I've seen a couple different steering locks. The steering locks are also different, for the steering column. So there's so many different accessories and stuff out there that you could have got dealer options or whatever. What to you is the most sought after rare accessory?
To me,
to you.
That's a tough one because, for the longest time, and actually up until recently, I was never a big fan of accessories. I definitely like the column locks. And are you talking like, factory type accessories or like MP accessories?
No, to you, what's like, if there's a holy grail of accessory that you'd like to have, and it's because you brought up earlier, I had a black and white bug, I had a gray and white bug, I had a red and white bug with the 2-tone. That was like early 90s, the whole vibe, right? We'll start to do like the Resto custom type thing. And you talked about the cowlick windows going by the wayside, and then everybody got little vent window fins that went on the outside, the air deflectors, because it was just this cool thing that you could put on your car, and then next thing you know, within 2 years, like every car's got them on there. But it just became kind of a thing in the 90s, right? The accessories. So Is there any accessories you're on the lookout for, or something that you have that's like your prize deal?
I mean, I've definitely, I didn't care for them before, but I really dig the empty interior lights, and I've seen a few, it seems like a few of those have been popping up lately.
The map lights, or is it going the place of the dome light?
No, like, I mean, I've actually seen them in multiple different places. I've seen them, mounted to the backside of the engine lid, like on Lee Bouchard's car, he's got one mounted to the backside of his deck lid. A lot of people will mount them like directly underneath the dash, kind of like down, below like where the ashtray is.
Yeah.
I've seen them in the trunk. I've seen people put them in glove boxes. I don't know if there really was any, particular, like exact place that they had to be, because I've seen them all over the place.
Right. And I almost wonder if these were made specifically for Impy, or Impy had them private label and they were made by something else, because you're talking about the one that's got a flip switch on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, and a lot of that stuff you can, if you do enough research, you'll find out that, American cars, they were sold for American cars too. It's, it kind of goes back to, what we were talking, early in conversation about just doing the research. If you're willing to do the research, you might be able to go to, like an American car, forum or something like that. You might be able to find one a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Where, obviously in the VW community, if it's got the name Empy on it and it's old school, it's usually going to have a decent price tag on it.
Yeah. Now, what do you got that you're working on coming up? And do you have a car for yourself?
No. So, I was talking earlier, I'd found, a buddy of mine had scored these two bugs, a 63 and a 64, owned by the same owner. The guy had bought these cars when he was stationed in Germany. I mean, obviously I'm guessing with, one being a year earlier than the other, it must have been different times, but they were both ruby red, both ordered with locking columns, and both ordered with cloth interior. And because like I was telling you, I always had a soft spot for 64s. I'm going to pick up that 64 for myself.
Yeah.
And then as far as projects, I've got, quite a few going on right now. I've got a ceramic green 60 rag top that's got like the cutout Fuchs, and he's doing, I guess you would call it a custom interior. It's a factory interior, but from an earlier car, like 56 and 7 European ovals.
Right.
Had the polka dot cloth. And so he ordered the polka dot cloth and, cloth headliner, German square weave carpet. That car is getting close to being done. And then I've got another car I'm doing a headliner on. I've got a car coming up from Riverside. It's a 53 oval that Bob Koch had restored, and it had been lowered and stuff like that. And the guy kind of wants to bring it up just a little bit, and he wants me to put together an Ocrasa motor. So we're going to actually do a bigger Ocrasa motor. I think it's going to end up being like a 1525.
Nice.
It's like that. So that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I've got multiple interior jobs and stuff.
Well, what we need to do is get you down here to one crazy weekend this October, and you can hang out down here and take a look at the cast.
Oh.
It's the shows like the shows used to be, right? Where it's a weekend full of stuff to do.
Well, and that's why, we need people like you to start, stepping up more to do this kind of stuff, to kind of, because I was talking to a friend earlier who was, almost kind of feeling, like the scene was kind of dying off a little bit. And, and I mean, it's definitely alive in Vegas. I think you're doing, an excellent job keeping things going and keeping people, enthusiastic about it. It's like, we don't want to see this hobby die off.
Right. And that's the thing, man. It's like the more we're out there driving our old Volkswagens, the more that people are going to be seeing these things, getting inspired and buying old Volkswagens, and the hobby continues to keep growing, So
yeah. And I think that's why I also like, the nice preserved cars, or, over the top cars that, most people aren't going to just hop in them and drive them every time because, I mean, how many times have you gone to a gas station or something in one of your VWs? I mean, have you ever been able to go to a gas station or store or coffee shop or anything without somebody coming up to you and telling you their VW story?
Oh yeah. I mean, I just driving home. It was a nice day out today. So I took my double cab to work and I drove, I drove down the strip the whole way home. And all it was people running to the side, grabbing their camera. And then some guy like, oh man, that's really cool. I like it. Everybody wanted to talk to me while I'm sitting at a stoplight. But yeah, it's, it's a car. And I've said it before. They're as American as apple pie. As much as people try to call it an import, that's why we're not accepted by the import crowd, because these are like American cars, man. That car was it was the counterculture car of the 60s. Anybody cool had one. Anybody who's on the cutting edge of technology had one of those cars. And I think, it's just become so much a part of of the American culture, even to the point where the people in Europe desire their Volkswagens to look like the ones that were customized in America,
Oh yeah.
So, well, I tell you, it's been good having you on, chatting with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
If people want to get in touch with you, are you on the socials and whatnot?
I don't spend a whole lot of time like on Facebook, but I'm on Instagram under Lanky's VW, and I get on there and post from time to time. I haven't done a whole lot lately, as far as posting stuff that I've been building and whatnot, but I figure I'll start doing a lot more of that here soon, and especially now that warmer weather is here. And
yeah. Well, let's get you posting up a bunch of the 1 year only off stuff, the oddball stuff. I'd like to see some of that stuff because that's pretty cool. When you're down that far in the weeds, man. But
I'll have to get some of that stuff up there. I mean, it'd be kind of cool too. Like you were kind of leaning towards earlier. Like I think it'd be cool, like if you could do something cool, at some of the shows. Like guess what year this is, and and what it's from. And
don't tempt me. I might come up with a Jeopardy. I might come up with Volkswagen Jeopardy, because one thing I love about One Crazy Weekend, because we're in Vegas, is I love giving away money. So like even it gives away a couple $100. Like you don't go to shows and get a couple $100, but it's like, especially if we can make it competitive and fun, and we come up with the VW Jeopardy. You know what I mean? And so, and it's not that hard to do, because there's a site online where you can build your own Jeopardy game. You just got to load the information in. So,
well, like how cool would it be to, set up your blackjack table or something at one of the shows, and, even make a podcast out of it, and do something like that. I think that'd be super cool.
No, I love it.
I've got plenty of ideas.
Well, I've gotten so much feedback, like a lot of good feedback from the 67, the big windows witter, the one that I did with Frenchie and Dean. But people really enjoy the technical stuff. You know what I mean? They love kind of the people getting in the weeds with that stuff. So that's definitely an option for people, because they just love the knowledge, and you ask 5 people, you get 5 different answers always, but
Yeah, you definitely do. And, like I said, I mean, it's for me, and I always try to be, super cool about it, because, that's another thing that I like about it, is being able to, either educate people or kind of help people in that right direction to get things built. And, but, once in a while you'll run across somebody who, maybe takes offense to it, because they're like, oh no, this is what it is. And, but I'll show literature, like, another really confusing car is the European standard models. So I'm sure, that you could get a ragtop all the way up through 67, right?
Right. Yeah. Matter of fact, I have a picture of one, and my buddy, well, Rich Craig then, because Rich Craig's got his 67 that's got a rag top and some stuff like that blue one that he has. And so I was just visiting him a week ago in Salt Lake, So yeah, there's just so many cool things that it's like, if you could do a podcast on almost each year, the variations between that year, in addition to the options that were available overseas, because it's crazy. There's so many. Yeah. There's thousands.
You could definitely break it down even into like a couple year. That's like you mentioned earlier, like 58 to 60s, or Just like you mentioned earlier, just kind of lumping a couple years together. And I mean, I could literally go down each one and start, rattling off all the 1 year only items, all the little differences. And, I guess cause I don't think there's a whole lot of concourse shows for VWs. I mean, I think that'd be kind of cool to see as well once in a while, but
yeah, well, maybe I'll have you down as a guest judge, and I'll do a select group of 10 vehicles. Who's the most correct? And we'll have one section, bring your car there. The most correct car gets a few $100, and we'll just see. We'll put some people there that'll put their nose to the grindstone. We'll look at the cars. I think it would be total chaos and absolute fun. So it's definitely, that's definitely something I like the sound of. So who knows, maybe I'll reach out to the Vintage Volkswagen Club of America and say I'm going to have a special group for concourse cars, two categories, restored and all original. And we'll do 2 categories. Doesn't matter what it is, bus, bug, beetle, whatever. And you know what, you're giving me some ideas. So, but
even if something like that doesn't work, I mean, it's all about trying to bounce ideas off each other. Like I said, we got to keep this hobby alive. And it's not just about, the super, super correct cars. Cause like I had told you before, I like all of it, I mean, I really dig the route you went with your Type 34 because it's, I think we need to see stuff like that to kind of keep it alive. I mean, as much as I love the original stuff, it can become a little boring at times. It's cool to see flashier paint jobs and different wheels that are totally out of the norm.
Good to see something that's not the same.
Exactly. But there's always going to be that spot for the super original cars. And there's always going to be the people that want to be brought back to that super original car that they, maybe their parents or grandparents went and bought when it was new, and, and they're wanting to bring it back to, exactly how it was when it was new.
Right. Well, cool. Well, Jason, I appreciate you for coming on the podcast, man. And we'll do it again. I think you're giving me some ideas, and we're going to get back with you, and we're going to do I got some ideas we'll work on. We'll do a specialty episode. How about that?
Yeah, that works for me. I'm available whenever.
Well, cool, brother. I appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Bill.
No problem. Well, if you like that podcast, and I'm sure you did, make sure you share this podcast with all your VW buddies, copy and paste in whatever format you're listening to, and forward it to a group of your friends. Do that today and help Let's Talk Dubs keep growing. The world's largest Volkswagen podcast, a fast-growing VW podcast in this space there is. Many have tried, but few have accomplished over 300 episodes of Volkswagen history listening to. So I'm excited to bring that stuff to you. Don't forget One Crazy Weekend. For more information, go to letstalkdubs.com. To support the podcast, you go to letstalkdubs.com. Pick up some merch, and we'll get you guys rolling. This short little bit here, you guys should be receiving some registration information. Once you get your registration information for the link to Car Show Pro, you guys make sure you upload a picture of your car to Car Show Pro. It's not that hard. I'll send an explainer video with it as well. And plenty of stuff going on. Keep posted for when I'm going to be putting out on my socials when that video is going to be coming out with Nicole Johnson's Detour. And if they're going to have it, if they're going to run it live or do a deal where they're going to do a live premiere, I'll see if I can be on the live premiere with that and maybe chat with you guys. Let's just flood. If they do that, let's just freaking blow up and flood the chat. So that would be awesome. Love to see the VW people get out there, man. But I'll keep you guys posted. I'll try to do the bat signal if that's going to happen. And again, it's their thing, and I'm not trying to do too much with hassling them. But I'll see if maybe they can do a premiere video. That would be rad. So yeah, I'm excited for so much stuff that's going to be happening this year, and excited to see you guys this weekend up in Northern California, guys. Make sure you go check out the Red Barn Swap Meet. Gates open today, Friday at 12 o'clock. So gates lock at 11 p.m. Then you're locked in until Saturday when the swap meeting kicks off. So go check it out, Red Barn VW Swap Meet. I wish I was there. Unfortunately, I got so much stuff going on that wasn't able to pull that one off this weekend. So, and then Sunday they've got the Kelly Park Meet the Golden Gate chapter Volkswagen Club of America. They're going to have that Kelly Park meet. So bummer I'm not there this year, but shout out to all my homies up in Northern California. What's up? Thinking about you guys. Have fun. And, you guys keep sharing Let's Talk Dubs. I appreciate all you guys. And I look forward to seeing some of you guys at some of the next events. So until next week, guys, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen.